We're only a couple days into the John Harbaugh New York Giants era, and he is already making major changes to this organization. I'll tell you what those are coming up in a second, but if you're fired up for John Harbaugh and being a New York Giant, get your Harbaugh Ball t-shirts today. Go to chatsports.com/HarbaughNYG. You guys have been showing a lot of love. We greatly appreciate it, and I'm fired up. We're playing Harbaugh Ball at 1925 Giants Drive. This is New York Giants Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Marshall Green, and I still can't believe it that John Harbaugh is our head coach. Excited to talk about today's show. Shout out to Ian O'Connor, who put out an awesome article. Go check that out on The Athletic. I'll actually link that in the description of today's show. But the biggest news, a couple of different ways that he's already making changes, is how the power structure is from head coach to general manager to ownership. One of the biggest, I would say, stopping points from this deal getting done was how John Harbaugh was going to do his job, but more importantly, who he was going to report to when he was doing his job. And the news has come out, John Harbaugh is not going to report to Joe Schoen. Schoen is not the boss of Harbaugh. The only boss that Harbaugh has is Mr. John Mara. And this is how it should be. You're telling me that John Harbaugh, the guy that's going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame NFL head coach, was going to work for Joe Schoen? That was never going to be the case. And your head coach and general manager, in my belief, they should work together. And that's what's going to happen with Mr. Harbaugh now being a Giant. Ian O'Connor writing this for The Athletic, quote, Harbaugh needed it in writing that he would report to John Mara and not to Schoen. A fact that ran counter to the way the Giants have conducted business. New York had historically been a GM-centric organization, even with tough guy coaches and two-time champions Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin. Harbaugh was pushing ownership to change to more of a coaching-driven model, and it was taking time to get there. And it's done. And this is the way that it should be. Maybe if you're a GM that's been successful and been there, done that, and you're bringing in a young head coach, like maybe if Joe Schoen was bringing in a Chris Shula who's never been a head coach before, then he should report to Joe Schoen. But like we said, time and time again leading up to this moment, the time and the moment that you have John Harbaugh agree to be this head coach, you go from a Joe Schoen operation to a John Harbaugh operation. How many times did we say it? And now we're actually getting to live it. And this isn't something that Schoen should be worried about, something that he is unfamiliar with. Because, as Tim Graham says, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott always have reported to ownership in Buffalo individually, which is why I found the New York Giants situation interesting over the weekend. Schoen was Beane's assistant general manager in Buffalo and should be used to that setup of the GM and the head coach working together and the coach reporting to ownership. That's what happened in Baltimore with John Harbaugh, and that is now what is going to happen with the New York Football Giants. So for all the people that were wondering what was going on for so long, they were dotting the I's, they were crossing the T's, but there was a point in time where it was unsure if Harbaugh was going to be this team's head coach. O'Connor writing on Twitter, one last note, as things got a little dicey last night, I texted John Harbaugh at 9:17 p.m. to see if he was still confident he'd become the team's next head coach. And his response, a shrugging emoji, says, sleep well tonight, Giants fans, and I'll get back to you shortly on that 2007 through 2011 book. Like, it seemed like this was always going to get done. I was confident from everything I was told that this was going to get done. But let's not get confused. There were some hiccups along the way. And it was that language of how the Giants were going to operate. They were saying all the right things to Harbaugh, but I'm glad that Harbaugh got this in writing. You can say, John Mara, that we'll do this for you. And Chris Mara says we'll do this for you. And Steve Tisch says you can use my plane whenever you want. But the Giants needed to get it in writing, and they did. And it is now a John Harbaugh ran football team. And I don't really care whose team it's not anymore, because now that Harbaugh's in charge, you are expected to win games. And Harbaugh's even talked about that. Ian O'Connor saying this wasn't about Schoen. The coach definitely feels he can work with the GM. Harbaugh wanted the ability to impact the entire operation, from security to training to analytics to media relations to staff size to assistant salaries to relocation expenses to you name it. And yes, in the unlikely event there's a stalemate on draft day between Harbaugh and Schoen, there's no longer any question who will prevail. This is a John Harbaugh-led football team. What John Harbaugh says, John Harbaugh gets. Let him cook. You didn't hire a coach that had 18 successful seasons in Baltimore to have him come and run a Giants operation. You hired him to be a damn good head coach, which he is, but to come and overhaul the disaster that has been hanging over the Giants since they last hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. You have gone from an organization that hoped they would win games to expect to win games. Chris Mara, who sounds like the unsung hero of getting John Harbaugh to put pen to paper to be this next leader of the organization, says, I believe in the long run, this agreement came down to a conversation between John and John, meaning John Harbaugh and John Mara. And Harbaugh has since come out and gave the utmost respect to Mr. John Mara, said he's being a fighter, he's being a warrior, and I'm praying for him every day, and it was good to see him in person, and he said he looked good. We also had heard that Chris Mara maybe had a second dinner with John Harbaugh to get this done. So he's already making changes in how the Giants go about their day-to-day business, but he's also changing the way that the Giants are looked across the National Football League. Betting odds have already been released for the Giants' win total for the 2026 season, and it's set at 8.5 wins. The Giants have won what? More than 8 games 2 times since 2013, 2012? And right now, their season total is at 8.5 wins. We told you that the Giants, once they hire John Harbaugh, they will go from hoping to win to expecting to win. And we are already seeing that happening. John Harbaugh said this to Ian O'Connor, quote, I think the Giants roster is strong, and it's our job to make it stronger. We are going to compete for the playoffs and for championships. I expect and want to make the playoffs next year. When is the last time a New York Giants head coach came out and said, I expect to make the playoffs? And that's not the ultimate expectation. That's like step one. That's like when you get on the elevator and you get to floor 1. Of course, the expectation with John Harbaugh is to get to the playoffs. The Giants went from hoping to win games over the last decade plus to now not only expecting to win games, expecting to win a lot of games. The eyes are once again on the right prize. It's not just making the playoffs. It's not just winning the NFC East. It's the drive for number 5. To put that in the case at 1925 Giants Drive, and that's what Harbaugh is aiming for. I wanted to talk a little bit about this excerpt from the Athletic article via Ian O'Connor, where he said, Harbaugh said final negotiations with the Giants involved, quote, building the football operations and structure. Quote, the conversation with John and Chris Mara and Joe about that were great, he said. We're not going to be much bigger operationally, but it takes time to put that together in negotiations. It finally came together, and I like the start of where we are going, but we still have to build it out. We're on the same page with it. Adding, quote, that's been a little bit overblown. We're going to bolster up the analytics a bit. Giants didn't have a bigger sports science staff than we had in Baltimore. We didn't really have a sports science department in Baltimore. So still some things had to be ironed out, but they got it done. Ian O'Connor writing John Harbaugh on why he picked the Giants. Quote, I grew up a football kid in Ohio. And my dad was a football coach. The history of the league means something to us. Why? Because it's the New York Football Giants. And I'm their coach. What a day. And what a week it has been. And what a moment that this day and a couple days ago have been for Giants fans. You deserve it. Best fans in the world. And now you have a head coach who knows how to win football games. And you have an organization that I believe is now going to do whatever it takes to win football games. And we haven't been able to say that since what? 2012, It's been a long, long time. A lot more awesome stuff to talk about on today's show. First, though, I got to give a major shout out to our proud sponsor, Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before next season. So close this season out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Download the app, use the promo code CLNS, and as soon as you play your first $5 lineup, they're going to get you $50. We have Indiana and Miami squaring off tonight. And my guy Mitchell Renz, the host of the Raiders Report, he is all in on Fernando Mendoza having a big game, and he also thinks Carson Beck is going to have a good one as well. These are his picks. You can roll with them. You can fade them. Just do it over at Prize Picks. Shout out to Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. John Harbaugh met with Jaxson Dart when he came to town for multiple hours, I was told. And Harbaugh said this to Ian O'Connor, quote, "I spoke with Jaxson 2 or 3 times at length, and I couldn't be more impressed with him. Watched him on tape. He had a hell of a rookie season, and he's got the right mindset." That is one tough dude. How could you not want to work and coach with Jaxson Dart? Can we just press the fast forward button to training camp? The fact that it's only January is a little bit upsetting because we have to wait another 7 months to go see what a John Harbaugh-led football team looks like. I am excited to see, though, what this roster is going to look like with Harbaugh at the helm and him ultimately having final decision-making power on who they sign in free agency, what trades they're going to make, if any, and who they are going to draft as well. You have one of the best coaches in the modern era running your football team. It's a good day to be a Giants fan. Shout out to Big Blue Newsroom, and mainly shout out to Ian O'Connor, who got this saying, to help ease Harbaugh's concerns about the chain of command and the Giants organization, Chris Mara had secretly met with him on Friday at an unclosed location between New York and Baltimore. Chris Mara is somewhat been out of the picture for the New York Giants in the last handful of years. And with what is going on with John Mara, look, all prayers and thoughts are for him. Someone else needed to step up. And Chris Mara, he stepped into the batter's box and he hit a grand slam with this one. He was the first member of a team's front office and ownership to meet with John Harbaugh. Took the PJ and went and picked him up in Baltimore. But before that, he went to Baltimore, had dinner or had lunch with him, ate chicken salad, and then he went to the Harbaugh house and he was eating some chocolate chip cookies that Mrs. Harbaugh made. What a way to reemerge as a face of this organization. Chris Mara deserves a lot of love for what happened over the last 14 days for Harbaugh to eventually put pen to paper to be here. We showed you the betting odds for the Giants. 8.5 wins is what the line is at this moment. If you were a betting man, which way would you go? Type O for over, type U for under. I want to hear from you in the comment section. Ryan Dunleavy, who does an awesome job covering this team, had this scoop saying current Giants assistants are meeting with John Harbaugh this week, and that is where their fate will ultimately be decided. A lot of people want to keep Carmen Brasillo, and I'd love to keep Brasillo, but I'm going to start to just work in the lane and ride in the lane of what Harbaugh wants. I'm going to totally understand as well. I know the offensive line has been a talking point of disaster for this team for way too long. And Carmen has done an awesome job. But if Harbaugh thinks there's a better man for the job, I'm going to trust him and his catalog of coaches that he's built up over the last 18 years. Hopefully they don't force Charlie Bullen on him. In fact, I know they won't, because John Harbaugh has it in writing that he gets to do essentially whatever he wants. Diana Rossini is saying, talking to NFL executives around the league as we kind of shift here about Buffalo's next head coach, as Sean McDermott has been fired. We're going to do a video on that later today. Says the name that keeps coming up is a familiar one, the Buffalo native, and someone Josh Allen loves, Brian Daboll. How funny would that be? Brian Daboll goes back to be the head coach of the Buffalo Bills and gets to work with his best buddy, Josh Allen. We also know that Daboll has went and had an interview with the Tennessee Titans. He's had an interview with the Chargers to be their offensive coordinator, and there are reports coming out that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to conduct an interview with Daboll as well. Just keep him out of the NFC East. That's what I want. Do not let him go to the Philadelphia Eagles. Nothing that they really can do at this point. But, yeah, I don't want to see him in the NFC East. Also, there's reports out there that Mike Kafka could be the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator. Sounds like an interview is either scheduled or has already happened. The reporting on that hasn't been great, but Mike Kafka is someone that is of interest for the Eagles to be their next offensive coordinator. So we'll see on that. A lot more news to talk about, a lot more things coming out of the Giants building. Will they hire Sean McDermott? What are they going to do at defensive coordinator? What are they going to do at offensive coordinator? Todd Monken is interviewing again for the Cleveland job. A lot to talk about. This is the place to hear about it. So hit that sub button and let's go.